going to hand it over to the friend of Serbia, Charles. Charles has a much longer presentation, but it's really interesting. I saw it earlier, so it's a lot of stuff I didn't know. Let me try to set him up properly.
Super. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for getting up so early here this morning. A number of you, I saw you out and about last night, about 3 in the morning. I stumbled into bunches of you. Anyway, like he stated, this is one of the largest events of this kind in the world. Many of these sponsor companies, we've been able to bring CHI here, CIEE here, CSB, a number of the different sponsor companies here. We got a couple people from the U.S. Embassy here with us today, so thank you for coming. We're going to go through today and do a little bit of a little history lesson for you about United States and Serbia relations. So bear with me here. Looks like everybody's got their eyes open, so that's wonderful. Here we go. Our relationship, the United States of America and Serbia, it began in 1879 with the first Serbian Consulate General opened in New York City. Then in 1882, the Serbian Parliament adopted our Contract Convention of Diplomatic Relations. 1882, the USA did the same thing, so we have a really good history all throughout the 1900s. Our first U.S. ambassador to Serbia was Eugene Schuyler. He was also a minister in Greece, Romania, and he was the first diplomat to visit Russian Central Asia. Then we go Woodrow Wilson, a really interesting story about Woodrow Wilson. He was the 28th president of the United States, really good friends with Mihailo Pupin. And he also, during World War II, he issued, or World War I, he issued an order to fly the Serbian flag over the White House, which was a really, really interesting story. He had a statement that was that he had read throughout. It was a big, long statement. I didn't have it here, but that he sent around to all the churches throughout the United States and have them read this really beautiful story about the struggle that the Serbians were going through, and a couple of the propaganda posters they had at the time. King Peter actually came to the United States after that with President Roosevelt. He actually addressed our our Congress here. So he was up there speaking to all of our congressmen. Great little story. And he actually, when he passed away, they buried him in Libertyville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. They recently, I forget when it was, in 2013, they took his remains back to Serbia and they buried him down by Topola, I believe it was. Operation Halyard. This is a really, really interesting story that I found out about when I came to Serbia. The Serbian villagers in World War II were able to rescue 500 U.S. airmen. So it's a really neat little thing. I want to show a little video for you here. So let's watch this really interesting little story.
Well, as we celebrate Independence Day, 4 veterans of World War II want to thank those who kept them safe in enemy territory years ago.
They were recently reunited at the Yankee Air Museum in Ypsilanti thanks to the Experimental Aircraft Association. Jennifer Flores was there and has their incredible story. These men are called the Forgotten 500 in this book, but as more and more people hear their stories, they're hoping the daring rescue mission and the men behind it will never be forgotten again.
When he said pull that ripcord, I expected to pull the ripcord like a lawnmower handle.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it came out in my hand. Now what do I do with this?
More than 60 years have passed since these U.S. airmen parachuted out of a plane into enemy territory.
I had the ripcord in my hand and I was free falling. But I immediately tried to get into the pack and get the pilot chute out. And I did that eventually. The pilot chute went up, and when that went up, then the much larger chute went up, and my flight afterwards was all okay.
Their mission, to bomb a German oil field.
We bombed Ploesti so that the Germans would be penalized for their lack of gasoline. But we paid one terrible price for that. Because the Germans knew what altitude we would come in. They knew the formation we would come in. They had us zeroed in perfectly, and we were like sitting ducks.
For many of these men, that mission was never finished. They died when their planes crashed into the treacherous mountains in the Balkans of Yugoslavia. For the others, they were parachuting into the unknown.
On my way down, I saw a flock of sheep. And when there's a flock of sheep, there's usually people around it. So I made up my mind that if I did get down without injury or anything, that's where I was going to head.
They landed in German-occupied Serbia, but got help from Serbian resistance fighters led by General Draza Mihailovic, a U.S. and British ally.
Those people had it pretty doggone rough and didn't have much to give, but they gave.
And they kept the U.S. airmen safe for weeks until the U.S. government got word that there were 50 downed soldiers in Yugoslavia. The United States sent in OSS agents on a daring rescue mission known as Operation Halyard. Fremont resident Arthur Jabillion was one of those men who risked his life.
They asked if I would go as a radio man. Well, immediately, did it in a heartbeat, I said certainly.
When he got there, he found not 50 airmen, but 250, and the number was growing.
But we stayed, and what turned out to be what started as a 10-day mission, we were there for almost 6 months and brought out 500 airmen in that time.
One by one, C-47s landed on a makeshift runway that the Americans and Serbs built by hand.
We were so pleased that these planes were coming in, and this is what we had worked hard for in getting the airstrip built, and it made us real happy.
But when they returned to the U.S., the government said they couldn't share their incredible story.
We weren't supposed to tell them how we got out. I think they wanted to keep that a secret.
These veterans feel the U.S. didn't give General Mihailovic credit for helping them. By the time the rescue happened, the U.S. and Britain had abandoned Mihailovic as an ally. They say false information was given that he was a traitor and collaborated with the Germans. The U.S. and Britain began siding with communist leader General Joseph Tito instead.
I don't know why the State Department will not admit that they made a mistake when they abandoned Mihailovic. He was voted Man of the Year on Time magazine in 1941, and then hailed as a hero, and then turned around and called him a collaborator simply to justify favoring Tito.
When the war ended, they say Tito put Mihailovic on trial, quickly found him guilty, and executed him by firing squad. The hundreds of rescued airmen were devastated they couldn't testify at the trial.
The only thing we ever wanted was to acknowledge that he did help us, that the Serbian people helped us, that he was not a traitor, that we made a mistake in backing Tito. We backed the wrong man.
In 2005, Jabillion, Musgrove, and a few other airmen presented Mihailovic's daughter with the Legion of Merit. It was awarded posthumously to her father by President Harry Truman for aiding the American soldiers. It was a big step in a lifelong mission, fighting to expose the truth.
We have a story to tell. We may be small, but we're vociferous, and we'll tell it till the day we die, won't we?
Amen.
Jennifer Morris, News 11.
How many of you were aware of that story? Raise your hand if you was aware of that. Very few of you. Super. Yeah, that was a really, really interesting thing. And not to be political, you know, we shouldn't discuss the Chetnik and the Partizan stuff, but it was a really interesting little story. Anyway, this is a little monument that's placed in this little place, Prijanje. I don't even know how to say that. Prijanje. I don't even know where that's at. Where's that located? Somewhere in central West Serbia, somewhere maybe. Anyway, back to that. Then we have this gentleman here. This was his gravestone, and I thought this was really nice. He's one of the Forgotten 500, and he even put on his tombstone, one of the Forgotten 500 rescued by Serbian Chetniks, and he was from the state of Ohio. Then we have a lot of our presidents that actually acknowledge Mr. Mihailovic, and this is Harry Truman from the state of Missouri. Then we have President Eisenhower, one of his statements that he made about Mihailovic. Richard Nixon, he also issued a little statement about Draza Mihailovic. Ronald Reagan from the state of California. Also Tito. Then we get into the 1960s here. When Tito came. Tito was in the USA 3 separate occasions. His third and final visit, he met with Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter issued a statement about Serbia and Yugoslavia, actually, and United States friendship. And then we go to the 1990s to the 2000s. And you know, every good friendship has its ups and downs. And so that's just, you know, that's part of history. Then we get to currently today. We get to we get to present day relations here. We get into our wonderful ambassador here, Mr. Kirby. He's done so many great things here. He's 32 years of State Department service. He's a former ambassador to Moldova. He's been at the embassy in Poland, South Korea, Germany, Tanzania. He's a wonderful supporter of this J1 visa program. He's done many wonderful things for this. And he also has something that is very rare. He has a picnic and invites certain students to his residence, actually. So he's a great friend to this program. We're very lucky to have him. Serbians who influenced American history. We've got a lot of Serbian Americans. This gentleman here, George Sagic, he was one that led to the uprising in Texas and led to the Republic of Texas in 1836. He organized a big group of people against Santa Anna's troops. So he was led to the Republic of Texas, actually. We've got this gentleman here. Many Americans had never heard of Mr. Pupin, and I was one of them prior to coming here to Serbia. I learned many things about him here. But he had a lot of things he did in the USA. They said he was on the founding board for NASA. He received praise from President Harding for his work on submarine detection devices. He had a lot of the Pupin cells, which extended the range of telephones. So he had a massive influence on the United States of America and the world, you could say. This gentleman here, Mihailo Page, he received one of the highest medals of honor in the military for the Battle of Guadalcanal. They said he stopped an entire regiment. Everybody was killed but this guy. And he was able to fight off a whole regiment of Japanese with 4 machine guns. So a tough guy. This gentleman here, one of my favorite actors, Carl Malden. He passed away, I believe he was 95 or 96. He lived to a ripe old age, but he was a Serbian. And they said one funny thing about him, his name was Sekulovic. And they said he would always, every movie, every TV show, everything he's ever been in, he would always mention that name. It wasn't in the it wasn't in the script, but he'd always throw in Sekulovic, they said. Vlade Divac, many Americans, a lot of my American friends, when I told them I was moving to Serbia, a lot of them thought it was Russia, you know. And then I said, no, have you heard of Vlade Divac? Oh, yeah. So everybody knew Vlade Divac. They said he was one of 7 players in NBA history with 13,000 points, 9,000 rebounds, 3,000 assists, and 1.5 thousand blocks. Had a big impact with 3 different NBA teams in the USA. Stana Katic, beautiful young lady. She's won many awards for that show, Castle. And that sums up our history. You know, we've had some great times and some not so great times with our country, but we're looking at the future now. The future's bright. They said last year on this program there was about 2,700 Serbian students that went to the USA on this program, and the wonderful staff here at the embassy said they've already had about 2,000 people this year, so they're expecting a lot more. So probably around 4,000, over 4,000. Work and travel group here. Last year we had I think about 450 students. And this year we have about 800 of you. So massive growth in this program. So we want to thank you for being part of this. Now we're going to go through something a little bit more important, I think. And we're going to talk a little bit about traveling to the USA. On this program, raise your hand in here if you've been on this program before. Super, a few of you, and the rest of you haven't.